All right, man, peace. So as most of you brothers probably know by now, at least those of you who follow the NBA, Mr. Kawhi Leonard, the superlative and stoic shooting guard slash small forward, currently of the San Antonio Spurs, has finally decided to issue a decree to make his feelings known in regards to what his situation is as opposed to what he wants it to be. He's declared that he wants to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. Please keep in mind that Los Angeles is the city where he's from. I also believe that his team has been in contact with LeBron James's team, and that LeBron James is pretty much just waiting for the next shoe to drop in regards to whether or not Kawhi Leonard is going to be traded to LA. I think that LeBron James and his team have been prime movers in pretty much putting the battery in the back of Kawhi Leonard, as well as his management team, to let them know that if you can make this trade happen, me and Kawhi can team up, I can recruit Paul George, and we can see if we can take down Golden State. I think that a lot of what's going on right now has to do with that. I truly believe that. In addition to that, new information is being brought forth about Kawhi Leonard still being upset about Tony Parker's statements during the season, which does not surprise me at all. I made a video about that whole situation a while back, in which I likened what Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili did to Kawhi Leonard to the classic film A Few Good Men, in which many of the top Marines were given an order by Colonel Jessup, played by Jack Nicholson, to smoke out a very weak Marine. And I think that Kawhi Leonard and his team understood what I understand, which is that there's no way that Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili are going to go off script and decide to go before the media and attempt to publicly humiliate him and question his manhood, unless Greg Popovich was behind the whole thing. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
All right, guys, let's get into it right now. So Kawhi Leonard...
Okay, Mr. Chireen.
Yes, you got it right. Good stuff. Juan's out of San Antonio, and his eyes are set on L.A., according to our Chris Haynes and Adrian Wojnarowski. Now, Leonard grew frustrated with how the Spurs handled his quad injury and feels the team turned on him when he sought a second opinion. Stephen A., talk to me. What's this?
Let me say this before Stephen A. Smith ignites on Kawhi Leonard. I do believe that a lot of the antipathy between Kawhi and the Spurs upper management has to do with the fact that they tried to publicly embarrass him. They poked and prodded to see if he could be mentally manipulated. And I think that he understands, as all real men understand, that when people are trying to troll you, especially to an excessive degree, it's because they have no respect for your intellect.
What's it really about?
This is about Kawhi Leonard wanting to go to LA. Listen, I'm not about to sit here and tell you that the Spurs handled everything in sublime fashion. I'm not about to sit here, Max, and tell you that they were the epitome of perfection with every little thing that they did. I don't.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, how about this? How about not just being the epitome of perfection? How about being the epitome of professionalism, which is one of the monikers that have been placed on the San Antonio Spurs organization for the last 25 years or so. They've shown very little professionalism in how they've handled this situation.
I don't know all the details, to be quite honest with you.
Well, then, brother, that means that you're derelict in your duties, because you're supposed to be a major media member with connections all across the NBA. So why are you speaking on something when you have no information? People like myself who are on YouTube are left to conjecture and speculation, because all I can do is go by what my mind tells me. You're supposed to have actual connections, so you got to do a little bit better, brother.
I leave that up to Wojnarowski and others, because I spent my years as an insider. Good luck to them and the hard work they put forth. I'm glad I don't have to do that.
That means that Wojnarowski needs to have a show, or he should be a guest on your show. He works for ESPN. How come you have not called him, asked him to call up the show so that you can have a real conversation about what's really going on
any longer? But let me be very, very clear. We've all been hearing that Kawhi Leonard wanted to be in LA for the last 2 years. That's what we've been hearing. So why is it that we're suddenly hearing this story about how, well, he doesn't appreciate the way they may have handled the quad situation? You've got players questioning whether or not he was legitimately hurt, or whatever the case may be, when they confronted him, led by Tony Parker and those other guys. We had Steven Jackson on the airwaves articulating to the world that there's no way those players would have approached him without Greg Popovich's approval. I get all of that. But what it comes down to more than anything else, my man, Kawhi Leonard, you want to be in LA? Which box?
Well, Stephen A. Smith, here's the problem with your attempt to attack Kawhi Leonard. You started your soliloquy by stating that You and many of the other members of the NBA media have known for the last 2 years that supposedly Kawhi Leonard wanted to be on the LA Lakers. And of course, you're trying to use that as some type of pretext to invalidate what Kawhi Leonard is saying about the San Antonio Spurs front office. That's not quite making sense, sir, because if you knew that Kawhi Leonard wanted to be on the LA Lakers 2 years ago, then he should have made his trade request 2 years ago. He's making his trade request now because he understands that the relationship between himself and San Antonio is, in his mind, irreparable. He feels betrayed. And there are certain people like that you encounter in life. There are two types of people. There are people who like hijinks. They like up and down. They like break up, make up. And then there are people that when you cross them, when you betray them, when they see that you're not loyal, they're not fucking with you ever again in life. And Kawhi Leonard comes off to me as that second type of person.
By the way, is where he's from. Look, damn it, I'm a native New Yorker. Okay? You're a native New Yorker, Max. Now, listen, we love New York as a city that never sleeps, all right? New York is New York is New York.
Where it's at.
Okay? How many times did I sit up there and scratch my head with like this? I've had a change of heart.
Yeah.
You know, the palm trees,
That's
sunshine,
every day.
Tinseltown, Hollywood, Rodeo Drive. I mean, come on, Beverly Hills. I mean, LA Live, every Venice
Listen, I
Beach,
lived there for 4
Palisades,
years. It was a good time.
everything. LA is special. There is no crime in wanting to be in LA instead of the Riverwalk. The Riverwalk is very, very nice. But there is absolutely, but look at that. Look at me, come on
Don't
now.
do the Riverwalk like that. You can't compare it to this.
The only
Santa Monica
thing.
Pier right there, downtown.
Hold on,
This is so terrible. I have no idea why Stephen A. Smith has not taken Molly Karam off camera and told her, look, your input is welcome, but you cannot speak when I'm speaking. There's such a difference in decorum in how this show is handled in regards to the moderator and how the Skip and Shannon show is handled. And I think a lot of it has to do with the subconscious correlations between how liberal females view the Caucasian male as opposed to how they view the so-called black male. Because I noticed this when Skip Bayless was on this show First Take, that the moderator would always be female and they would always have more respect for Skip Bayless than they would Stephen A. Smith. Of course, one could use the excuse back then that Skip Bayless was the boss and Stephen A. Smith was not. Well, now Stephen A. Smith is the boss and he's still receiving the same lack of respect that he was receiving when Skip Bayless was there. And that's not an issue with the moderator. That's an issue with him. It's his job to communicate to Molly Karam off camera that your input is welcome after we're finished debating. In the same way that Joy Taylor would offer her input only when she was prompted or at the end of the debate. That's called order. Stephen A. Smith is supposed to establish order, and he's not doing a very good job of it.
Molly, Max, don't disrupt my flow, Molly.
All right.
Don't disrupt my fro.
Just
Molly and Max, listen.
Don't disrupt your flow or your fro. I think that the Most High disrupted your fro starting about 15 years ago, brother.
Listen to this, man. The only thing missing from that video is the music. I love LA. Do you understand? It's special, and we're not even from there.
Yeah.
This man is from there. The Riverwalk is nice. It's very nice. It's very nice. I don't mind visiting the San Antonio, but damn it, it ain't LA. You want to be in LA, so all of this noise about the San Antonio Spurs. This is an organization that has won 5 rings, Max. This is an organization that has spent a better part of the last decade being universally recognized as the standard. And suddenly...
Yes, they've been universally recognized as a quote-unquote standard by the media, by people who've never participated in their organization. And of course, that's a company line that gets propagated by proverbial athletic robots like Tim Duncan and David Robinson. So can we really trust them? They're company men. Kawhi Leonard is the first great player that the San Antonio Spurs have had pretty much since George Gervin, who has declared that he's not going to be a robot. And we see how they're treating him right now. They've tried to cast aspersions on him for the entire season, and he's done with it. Once again, I have no doubt that Kawhi wants to go home. He wants to play for the LA Lakers. But to say that he's going through this entire rigmarole because he's trying to hide the fact that he's scared to say it, I just don't buy that. He could have said that 2 years ago. Once again, if you've known, and many of the other members of the media have known, that Kawhi wanted to be an LA Laker for 2 years, then he would have made the trade request 2 years ago. It's not that hard to figure out. Please keep in mind that he was the MVP of the NBA Finals in 2014. That's 4 years ago. So if he wanted to join the Lakers 2 years ago, according to your testimony, he could have made that request with no problem. He feels betrayed. Get over it. Stop trying to make excuses for your basketball god, Greg Popovich. He's an MK handler that went a little bit overboard, and now he's having to deal with the ramifications of his actions. Bottom line.
We're going to impugn the integrity of the organization? Stop. You want to be in LA. Be in LA. Try to get to LA. It's just that simple to me, Max.
Well, oftentimes things are just that simple when you're a simple person. Please keep in mind, we already have a precedent for a so-called high-level medical staff, that being the Boston Celtics, misdiagnosing a player and it costing him probably hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's just that simple.
Look, what this points out is the built-in advantages that the Lakers have. Yes, LA is a market, 100%. That's a huge advantage, provided the Lakers have competent management. If they are being handled competently, doesn't even have to be Jerry West, just competently, then LA has an enormous advantage. The problem is that type A free agents, the cream of the crop, the guys who could be, MVPs in any given year, in the history of basketball, how many of them have ever signed a free agent contract, a max deal in a place like San Antonio? San Antonio, we're not talking about a terrible market no one wants to be in. It's just not a major market. And we're talking about a state without state income tax, and the greatest coach maybe of all time, an incredible winning tradition and championship tradition over the last 20 years, and yet with or without cap issues, how many type A guys are going to sign there? And sorry, LaMarcus Aldridge does not count. He's an all-star caliber player, not an MVP conversation.
Yes, and LaMarcus Aldridge was another player who was requesting a trade right before this season because he was disenchanted and unhappy playing with the Spurs. It seems as if these two media pundits are more concerned with protecting the supposed legacy of the San Antonio Spurs and their alleged reputation than they are with trying to get to the truth. This is why I always state this on this channel. Many of the more mainstream media members are getting frustrated by viewership starting to turn now to social media, to the internet, to YouTube, to try to receive or attain some higher level form of answers to problems, situations, or conundrums that we see in everyday life, even in the sports world. The reason why that's going on is because I think that people are starting to figure out that many of these mainstream media members are more concerned with protecting narratives than getting to the truth, getting to facts.
It just doesn't happen. It's like when Greg Monroe signed in Milwaukee. Even a guy like that who got $15 million a year doesn't tend to sign. Never signs in a place like Milwaukee. But that's Greg Monroe, let alone a guy like LeBron James. And so Kawhi Leonard is sitting in San Antonio saying, I don't see a path to greatness here. I don't see how you guys can get a top flight free agent.
Why would you deduce that, Max Kellerman? Please provide some empirical data to substantiate that nonsense that you just spewed out of your mouth. Kawhi Leonard just won an NBA championship with them in 2014. He got to the finals with them in 2013. For all intents and purposes, it's believed that the San Antonio Spurs would have given the Golden State Warriors hell in the 2017 conference finals had he not gone down with injury. So why would you state that the reason why Kawhi Leonard wants to leave the San Antonio Spurs is because he doesn't believe that they have a chance to win a championship? That makes absolutely no sense. None whatsoever. Maybe he wants to leave because of what he's stating. That the situation, the relationship between himself and the front office is irreparable. And right now he feels as if he's not ready to reconcile with them. And most likely will never be ready to reconcile with them because the trust has been broken. Maybe it actually is what he's saying.
To this destination, and otherwise he's showing not much faith in Greg Popovich's ability to create a championship team anyway, in spite of that, which Popovich has shown. So that leads back to your point, Stephen A., which he wants to be in Los Angeles. He is from there. LA is the place everyone wants to be. The Lakers are the marquee brand in the history of basketball. They are the #1 brand on the planet Earth. If you talk about basketball, the first brand is the Lakers. And all it takes is competence in their front office to have guys like Kawhi Leonard, like Paul George, who are from the area, who admire the Lakers' history, want to play there. So yes, of course, Kawhi wants to go. It's partly because he doesn't believe, I think, at this moment, rightly or wrongly, that Popovich can put a championship team together around him in San Antonio.
Yes, he does not believe that Greg Popovich could put a championship-level team around him in San Antonio. And the last time that he was healthy, they should have been going up one game over the Golden State Warriors, a team that many so-called basketball experts allege is the greatest team ever. He was about to go up 1-0 over them on their home court in the 2017 Western Conference Finals. And yet, Kawhi Leonard does not believe that they have any chance of building a championship team around him. That makes no sense whatsoever and has no substance to back it up.
And it's partly because the Lakers right now look like they're onto something. Ron looks like he's going. Paul George looks like he's going.
So basically you're saying that the reason why Kawhi Leonard wants to be traded to the LA Lakers is because it's strictly due to the notion that the quote-unquote Lakers may be onto something. I believe that he wants to be traded there because his team has communicated with LeBron's team and that they can build something successful over there. But it's pretty much a situation like if you're in a relationship with someone and you feel like you can't trust them anymore, you're ready to move on to something new. But if you feel like the trust was still there, you try to make it work with that person. I don't think that it's much deeper than that. And I think that we have to consider the source before we try to denigrate what they're saying. Kawhi Leonard has no history of being disingenuous.
If Kawhi can meet them there, they are number one market, number one brand, challenging the Warriors legitimately.
Elvis, you've left the building, and I'm going to bring you back to fold. You're not getting away with that. You're not being away with that. And excuse me, Ed could just save that comment for later. I'm getting on him here. I'm getting on. Well, allow me to get on him. You can come to his rescue later. Let me handle this for a second. Max Kellerman, here's the deal, my man. It's interesting that you say that because you're the same person that talked about how the San Antonio Spurs didn't need but so much to compete for a championship. Certainly, you talked about how Kawhi Leonard, they were up 22-23 when Zaza Pachulia undercut the Golden State Warriors. You brought up...
Well, Zaza Pachulia actually undercut Kawhi Leonard. He didn't undercut the Golden State Warriors. He actually helped them. He should have been the MVP of that series.
Up all those things. Now we're here talking about how San Antonio really has no chance. Kawhi Leonard recognizes that, and as a result, they're not going to do but so much. Well, unless you're going to the Golden State Warriors, the reality of the situation is how much can you ask for if you're Kawhi Leonard and you have an opportunity to be who you are, if you recognize LaMarcus Aldridge as an all-star, if the system in place caters to your strengths, not to mention the greatness of Greg Popovich, who, by the way, in my opinion, will never do business with the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't know how he's going to pull this off because...
Well, we'll see, sir. Fortunately, business is not predicated off of your opinion. Business is predicated off of what's expedient for both sides. And if Kawhi Leonard states unequivocally that I'm only going to sign a long-term contract with the LA Lakers, it is going to diminish his trade value and is going to compel the San Antonio Spurs to have to do what's best for their organization. They are going to have to trade him, most likely to the Lakers, but we'll see. Maybe they can communicate with Kawhi's team and state, well, if we trade him to Boston, would you consider signing a long-term deal with the Boston Celtics?
Because unless Kawhi goes there as a free agent, I can't see a trade transpiring with San Antonio because I don't see San Antonio doing business with the Lakers. But that's just me.
I feel like you guys are ignoring a major point here.
Go ahead.
They misdiagnosed his injury.
Thank you, Molly Karam. Thank you.
He has no trust with this organization. The same thing they did to Isaiah Thomas. It's not just that he wants to go to LA. That's major. That could cost his career millions and millions of dollars.
Many people have played in sports and they went to get a second opinion. They've gone to a different doctor. They've been treated by somebody else, whatever the case may be. I'm saying to you that's not enough in this situation. Now,
who are you to dictate what's enough, Stephen A. Smith? So you're telling me that as a professional athlete, you put the trust of your body, your future, and your welfare in the hands of the medical staff of the team that you play for. And they can basically tell you that the injury that you suffered is something that you should be back and playing in 2 weeks when it's actually something where you need to rehab or maybe even get surgery for that could cost you the whole season. And if you go out there and you listen to them, you could destroy your body even more, and that's not a major issue? No, sir. You're just someone who wants to protect the legacy and the reputation of the San Antonio Spurs, and you're upset with Kawhi Leonard for whatever reason, most likely because he's too reticent to give you an interview.
Now, when the players approach you and you believe they've been prodded by Greg Popovich to do so, and they're questioning the legitimacy of that injury, now you've got a different kind of problem. That's fair, but I still think all of that, Max, pales in comparison to the...
Well, Stephen A. Smith, the reason why Greg Popovich, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili were compelled to speak to the media and try to cast aspersions in a subliminal way, at least in regards to Greg Popovich, Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker, they were not sublime at all. They were overt with it. The reason why they felt like they could do that was to show support for the medical staff over Kawhi Leonard. So once again, Molly Karam was correct. You have to acknowledge that. If you don't acknowledge that, then basically what you're saying is that facts don't matter, only your feelings do. And you can't have a segment just based on your feelings. You have to actually do some real digging and some real work. You're supposed to be a media member, sir.
To the fact that this brother is from the area, he wanted to be in LA before he was injured, Molly and Max. They were talking about how Kawhi wanted to be in Los Angeles. And by the way, that was when they were still a championship contender.
Yep. That's why, Molly, I don't...
Well, once again, Stephen A. Smith, if Kawhi Leonard wanted to be with the Lakers, even while they were a championship contender, as I've already pointed out, he won the NBA Finals MVP back in 2014, which means that he was already of high value as a player from back then 4 years ago. You stated that you and many other members of the NBA media have known about him wanting to play with the Lakers for the last 2 years. From 2 years ago, he was viewed as an NBA superstar. He could easily have made that trade request from back then. It would have been no problem. It's clear that the reason why he's compelled to do so now is because he has no trust in the team anymore. And 4 years ago, he was looked at as probably the best up-and-coming player in the NBA. He could have made the trade request 4 years ago.
I understand what you mean about misdiagnosing the injury, but I do think the Spurs have a reputation of dealing in good faith. And
Right, but Max Kellerman, who are you to state what quote-unquote good faith is if you've never actually been a part of their organization? If you listen to Amin El Hassan, the Spurs actually have a reputation for utilizing chicanery and psychological manipulation on their players and with the league.
Kawhi would be as aware of that as anyone, considering his history with the team, a Finals MVP.
Right.
He came up in a culture set by Tim Duncan. Not just Popovich, but Tim Duncan. But Tim Duncan was not originally from the most desirable market in the country, if not the world, who sports, by the way, the #1 franchise in the history of basketball. That is the truth about Kawhi and Paul.
Max Kellerman, once again, I'm not going to state that there is no basic credence to what you're talking about in regards to there being an allure to play for the LA Lakers. But I have a hard time believing that that's the prime mover in regards to why Kawhi has made this trade request. I can't state this enough. He's been one of the most sought-after players in the NBA for the last 4 years at least. You have to understand that there's a correlation between what Molly Karam is stating and his request. When you go to a medical staff and they give you the wrong diagnosis, that's going to mess up your head forever. Forever in regards to your trust with them.
Paul George, for that matter. Steve A., I think if I were a baseball player, I don't care what organization I came up with, how many World Series that team won, if I had a chance to play for the New York Yankees, the #1 market has the #1 team of all time, all it takes at that point for a player to want to go there, if they're from there, is competent management in the front office.
But wait a minute.
If it's
Question,
chaotic and incompetent, then I understand. But Stephen A., we even see that with Cleveland and LeBron. LeBron's from there. He went back to Cleveland. Imagine if Cleveland was LA and it had the #1 brand in the history of basketball. Of course he wants to go there.
Well, one can make the case that one of the main reasons why LeBron decided to go back to Cleveland is because he was unable to attain the level of clout and power within the Miami Heat organization that he wanted, especially in regards to how they treated many of the members of his team and himself. They did not allow LeBron James to call the shots to the level that he wanted. So I'm sure that it made it easier for him to decide to go back to Cleveland, especially in light of the fact that he was able to get 2 championships with Miami. And that even more makes my point in regards to Kawhi. Yes, there's always going to be a yearning for a player to go back to his hometown team. But you can make it easier to make him want to go back when you decide that you're going to shit on him, quote unquote. When you decide that you're not going to give him what he wants or what he needs. And especially with a relatively introverted cat like a Kawhi Leonard, he's most likely very easy to alienate in regards to treatment. He's someone like a Shannon Sharp stated when he was speaking about Kawhi Leonard, that he comes off to him as a implosive type of personality, meaning he keeps everything inside, but he does not forgive and he does not forget. And I agree with Shannon on that psychological assessment of Mr. Kawhi Leonard. But we're going to pick this up on part 2. Peace.